Okay, I got 20 questions.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Yeah,
God, I don't even know my name. How can I get
you
answer
got
questions?
19 left.
I like the way you started. Okay, ready? Question number 1. Some of them are boring, some of them are exciting. Question number 1. What's your full name and why were you named that?
George Allen Newell, and the George was for my grandfather, George Newell, and I don't know what the Allen was for.
Okay. Okay, that's one question.
Don't I get to answer it?
I'm going to do you afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask the same questions to you
Okay,
afterwards,
okay,
and then
okay,
you
okay.
can answer all of them.
Okay.
That'd be awesome. Okay, number 2. What is your favorite movie of all time?
I've got. Sorry.
Take your time. Take your time.
He's got the world in his arms, is what it was. I don't remember what.
That's the name of the movie, or that's a song from the movie?
Yeah, it was. It was the name of the movie.
He's got the world in his arms.
World in his arms. Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember who was in it? Any actors that were in it?
Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck. Okay.
Is that true?
Do you remember what it was about? I don't know.
Was a sea story.
A sea story?
Yeah.
Was he in the Navy?
Yeah, he was a captain on a ship, I think.
Okay. Why was it your favorite movie? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I just, at the time, it was the thing to see, and
Okay.
I was on my way to Texas with my friend Bob Thurman, and we stopped and saw it in Denver, I think, somewhere.
Okay. Okay, next one. What's your favorite song of all time?
I've got, it's a grand old flag.
It's a grand old flag. Okay. Number 4. What is your favorite place that you've ever traveled to?
I think Houston, Texas.
Did you go on work?
I was on a business trip down there, but it was so different because everything had to be inside. It was so hot. And it was a learning experience.
Okay. Okay. I brought 4 things with me that remind me of you. And I want you to tell me the story about them.
Did you give a lot of thought to this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the first one reminds me of you, but it itself is not going to be that important to you.
Oh, Cub
but
Scout.
it's a Cub Scout book.
Yes.
So I wanted you to share your favorite story about scouting.
Cub Scout.
What's your favorite story about Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts or any scouting? What's your favorite story?
Well, we had a little boy in our pack in Spokane that was a little retarded, and he practiced and practiced to do the flag ceremony for his rank, and when he got finished, instead of dismissed, he said dismissed.
Yep, I remember that too.
And broke it up.
It was in the house too, wasn't it?
It was where?
In the house.
In the house? Okay. Anything else you want to share about scouting? I know it was a big part of your life.
Oh, big part.
Oh, I had so many experiences. The vigil ceremony in the Order of the Arrow was very special. And where you sat all night and kept the fire going and thought about turned your thoughts inward. And it was very special because I had all 3 of my sons there.
That was big time, wasn't it?
Yep. Scouting was a big part of my life too.
It was.
I love camping now, and that's because of scouting. So thank you
Yeah.
for passing that on.
Yeah.
So that's one.
We each have a good uniform on, don't we, George? We have uniforms, don't we?
I've still got my uniform.
I still got my uniform.
Okay, so there's two parts to the second one.
Okay, 2 parts.
So this is something that you gave us in
Yeah, I
2016 for
remember.
our kids.
Yeah.
And it's got a picture of my dad and my mom.
Yeah, I made it.
You made it, exactly. So it reminds me of two things.
What?
The first is the railroad
Mm-hmm.
and your job at the railroad. And the second is your love for woodworking. So what can you say about, here, why don't you grab that for a minute. What can you say about your job on the railroad? Tell me about your job on the railroad.
My job on the railroad was very rewarding. It was a good job. I had good insurance. I wasn't worried about feeding my family, and it was something that I enjoyed doing. And this woodwork was also something that I enjoyed doing. And when I saw one of these, I just was inspired to make them. And so I thought about the kids and made them.
If you had to guess, how many woodworking projects did you do in your life?
How
Well,
many?
Yeah, if you had to guess.
In my life?
In your whole life, yeah.
Oh, a million.
Okay, that that would have been a guess that I had.
I
too.
think he's got them all in the shed.
I don't think they would all fit in the shed.
I
Okay,
just
that's
said-
number 2.
Mhm.
Here's number 3.
Oh.
Oh,
So that's a book that you
I
made-
wrote
you
this.
wrote.
I
It's a-
wrote this book.
So tell me the story.
Okay, 1955. Betty and I had just been married a year, and I had a son. And behind their house was a
I'm my mom
pond,
and dad's house.
pond called Achilles Pond. And I wrote this book for Patrick at that time. And I took it to a person that was in charge of that type of thing in Chihuahua. And she read it and said I should publish it. So I went to publish it, but they wanted so much money for it that I couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it in an envelope, mailed it to myself, so I had a postage mark on it, and kept it all those years. And then your dad had it done up for me.
To this day, I did not know that you wrote it that many years ago. I thought that
Mhm.
you wrote it 10 or 15 years ago. I didn't realize you wrote it so many years ago. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You did more than one, though, didn't you? Do a book?
No.
No?
Okay, now the fourth one I couldn't find, so I'm just going to ask you about the story.
Mm.
The question is, do you remember a time where we went to a Kansas City Royals game and the two of you pretended to catch a foul ball?
She did that.
Yep, I remember that. I remember that.
Okay, so what's your version of the story? I'll let her tell her version of the story, but what's your version of the story?
Well, you guys came home with these balls, signature balls, and I'd forgotten all about them for years until you were moving out of Havre, and here sat this ball on your dresser, and you actually thought that they had caught a foul ball,
Mm-hmm.
and to me that was something special because those balls don't come out of the pitcher signed by a whole team.
Exactly. I guess I wasn't very smart back then.
How
Was
old do you think you were?
I? Oh, I don't know.
4?
8?
Oh, were you?
Was that younger? Oh, I don't know.
I don't
I'm
know.
going on memory.
Small.
I don't
Smaller, maybe? Okay.
I think smaller.
Yeah.
Smaller, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Spokane.
Really? So tell me the places that you lived. From Spokane, where did you move and then end up back in Spokane?
Okay, from Spokane we moved to Valley, Washington, 50 miles north of here. And then I went to work on the railroad and moved to a lot of different places, but basically kept my home in Spokane. but I went to other work locations
Oh.
on 2-week periods, that type of thing. And then I moved to Kettle Falls, Washington, and then up to Salmo, British Columbia, and that's where I met Grandma. And from there, we moved to Colville, Washington, and Tonasket, Washington. And then her dad died, so the railroad moved me back to Salmo and put a job on for me, working an operator's job for a while. It was a kind of a special thing that they did for me. And we lived there for a little while, and then we moved back to Spokane, and from there to Havre, and from Havre to Glasgow, and from Glasgow to Sheridan, and from Sheridan to Kansas City, and I retired there.
Kansas City.
Lived a lot of different places.
Yes, we did. And when I was in Kansas City, I was in charge of so much railroad that I traveled all over.
Never saw him very often.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite place to live out of all those?
My favorite place? I like Kansas City. I liked it really well.
Okay. What do you remember most about your mom and dad?
They were hardworking. They didn't have much, but didn't seem to bother them. They were happy, and we were never hungry. My dad was a good, hard-working man, and I helped him. He taught me a lot. But when I was just a little guy, he'd have me crawling under the cars, and he would take extra jobs overhauling engines and things like that on cars for the people. And I'd crawl underneath and reach into the spots that he couldn't get his hand into. And I learned a lot from him.
He was a good guy.
But he was, he went along with us being Christians, but he never went into a church in all the time that I remember.
Really?
But when it came time, we belonged to that church up in Valley, and they needed more room. He went up there and outlined a job, and they dug a basement under the church while it was standing, and he put in a conveyor belt and the whole shooting match, and kind of directed the job to get the basement built underneath that building.
Interesting.
But when he was such a good-hearted guy.
He was a good guy.
He'd do anything for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And how old were you when he died?
What?
How old were you when your dad died?
When my dad died?
Yeah.
Oh, 35.
Oh, so even younger than me right now. I'm 37 right now. So
Yeah, I
even
was
younger than me.
working in Stryker, Montana when he died. And I got a call on the phone from the dispatcher on the railroad and said, your dad has passed away in Spokane, and we're going to stop a train and pick you up and take you home.
Yeah.
Okay. So where did you grow up, and what do you remember most about your childhood?
I grew up in Valley, Washington.
Just up north here.
Okay.
It was just about 50 miles from here, and it was a very small town, and I made friends that I still have that still come around, and we have a group that meets, well, not now this year. I was supposed to have the December thing, and I broke my neck, so I had to cancel it. But we met once or twice a year for dinner, and then we also have a reunion that is in April, and that was canceled this year. And there we get together, we're friends, and after I fell, most of them came by to see how I was doing. But growing up in Valley, at that time there was no television. This was a place where you went from house to house and played games, board games usually, like Monopoly or that type of thing, card games and stuff like that. And it made some close friendships. You weren't sitting and looking at something.
There's some I could do without when I think of it.
Who is your best friend?
Who's your
Then
best friend?
when you were a kid?
Oh, Dwayne Jones. And he and I were good friends from the first grade on. And just after we went to Havre, Montana, he was working on a logging job, and he was towing a log, and the log hung up and the cable stretched out, and then the log cut loose and went through the cab.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in his early 30s with 4 kids.
Oh man.
And but we were very good friends.
Okay. So how did you meet Grandma?
Okay, Grandma met me. I used to, when I went to Salmo, my job, the hours were from 11 to 7 because the train ran late, and then it had an early train, so the agent had to be there early. And so I'd go to breakfast at 10 o'clock. There was just the one cafe. And at that time, all the gals from the offices in Salmo would come in for coffee. And Betty was from the doctor's office, and Darrell was from the phone office, and Patty was from the lawyer's office. And I'm trying to think who else was coming in. But anyway, one from the drugstore. And so I was sitting there having my breakfast one morning, and here came these 3 gals up to me and said, "Can we join you?"
We didn't have any money, probably.
And she's the one that sat next to me and kind of attached herself to me.
Attached. Do you like it? Oh, God.
Okay. And then you were together forever after that? From
Yeah.
that moment on? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Tell me about your wedding. Where was your wedding? Tell me about your wedding.
My wedding was in Spokane. It was at Lidgerwood. No.
Presbyterian.
Yeah, it was at with the Presbyterian church out on.
Yeah.
Anyway, we.
That's where we were married, in Spokane.
Okay.
She had a bridesmaid from Nelson.
From up in
It was
Canada.
down here, and I had Bob Thurman. That's my best man, and it was it was a nice ceremony. And this Reverend Redford is the guy that did the ceremony, and he it was really good. It was, my mother played piano, and I'm trying to, yeah, there was another railroad guy that sang, and it was just a nice ceremony. It was small, not a lot of people, maybe 20 people, mostly ballet people.
Okay. Tell me about your time in the Navy and why you decided to join the Navy and just your experience there.
Well, in 1952, I got out of high school, and my uncle, Bill Newell, was at the Naval Air Station here in Spokane, and he said to me, "Would you like to come on this Naval Air Station as a reserve?" And I thought, well, that would be pretty nice because I was going to school anyway, and I was going to go to telegraph school. And so he got me enlisted into the reserves here at Spokane. And then later on, the Navy activated us, and I was on active duty for 3 years. I was on weekend a month duty for 7. So I had actually 10 years of active duty in the Navy.
Well, thank you for your service. I don't know if I've ever told you that, but thank you.
No, that's interesting.
Where were Dale, Bruce, and Pat born?
Okay. Pat was born in Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
Dale was born in Spokane.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce was born in Rockaway Beach, New York, which is Queens.
Yeah.
We were living in Brooklyn, but the hospital was in Queens.
Yeah.
How long did you live there?
In New York,
Mm-hmm.
18 months.
Oh, not too long. Okay.
But Grandma was pretty good size when we went to New York.
Okay. So from your standpoint, what was it like raising kids?
Doing what?
Raising kids. What was it like to raise kids when you were a young
it was
father?
fine.
And
It was good. I enjoyed my sons. It was nice to be able to sit down and talk to them. And my scouting with them kept me acquainted with them, and so I could discuss things with them. It's like your dad. When he first come home from college, he was all up on this. I can't think of what the name of this religion was, but it was this goofy one. And I plucked him down on the couch and I said, "I've known you for your whole life and you've known this bird for a couple of months." I said, "Now who are you going to believe, him or me?"
okay, I'd never heard that story. That's good. Was there a time when you were raising kids that you remember it being really difficult?
Remember what?
It being really difficult raising kids, that the
Oh.
kids were tough.
Well, yeah, we were pretty broke a few times, but raising the kids was not difficult. No, they were. You got trials and tribulations, and they did their things, and they got in trouble for them, and we disciplined them if it was necessary, and I think I kept their respect.
Okay. Is there anything in particular about my dad that is unusual or funny that you remember when he was a kid? Anything that stands out about him?
No, yeah, it does. When he first started scouting, he was so little, and he had to carry a backpack, and so he'd get the backboard on his back, and as long as he was on the level ground, he was okay. But if he started uphill, he went over backwards.
Sounds like me. I was the same way. Okay. What is the funniest family story that you remember? In your whole life, the funniest family story that you remember? Or for that matter, the funniest story you remember?
One. We had, I don't know, we used to take I had these little Yamaha motorcycles, and out behind our place in Havre, we had these little jump areas, and Ed Fairless would come over, and he'd go on these jumps with the boys, and he would do everything, and then he'd come back home, and he'd get up on the picnic table, and he'd jump off and play Superman for him. And then I was cutting a board on top of the table, and I got my saw blade too sharp, and I cut the table in two, so it dropped.
Things of life, eh?
Okay. Was there one person or one event that changed the course of your life?
Yes, there was. Jay McFarland was the depot agent in Havre, or in Valley,
Right.
when I was growing up, and I'd go over to the depot, and he was teaching me to telegraph when I was a young teen. And as soon as I got out of high school, he lined me up for Spokane Telegraph School, and I went to Spokane Telegraph School, and I went for 9 months, and then I called him and told him I was ready to go to work. So he called the superintendent and told him to send me over to Malaga, which is out of this way of Wenatchee, and he would train me in the depot. So that's what the railroad did. They sent me over there, but they hired me at that time at 60 cents an hour and no expenses. So I went over and I lived with them, with Jay and Ellie, and learned the railroad accounting, which is what these telegraph schools couldn't teach you. You had to be in certain regular railroad work. And I learned it, and it was a busy depot because they had Malaga plant there, and I learned all that. And then he took a vacation so I could go to work and get a seniority date. And he was inspirational in what I did.
Interesting. What are you most proud of?
Who am I most proud of?
What are you most proud of? Yeah.
What?
Yeah, what are you most proud of?
Oh, I think the life that we've led. I think that we've been pretty well together, and we've had a Christian life, and Betty's kind of kept me on the straight path. You know, when my kids were small, I used to go hunting on Sundays. And one Sunday she told me, she said, you better start going to church and teaching your sons the right things to do. So that was it.
Okay. What are you most thankful for?
I'm most thankful for the life that I've been able to lead.
Okay, last question. What is the single most memorable moment of your life?
The day Pat was born.
Why?
Because I had a son that was right there for me. And it was so important. And Betty was okay. and I was so proud.
I think we share that. I think my most memorable moment of my life up until this point was when my daughter was born, my first child as well. Well, thank you, Grandpa. I want to give you a hug. Thank you. I love you. I love you very much. Thank you for sharing that with me. That was nice. I'm going to share that with all the other grandkids and
That's good.
for them all to see. Okay, ready? We got another favorite movie. What is it?
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind?
Yes, and I was sitting between two crying ladies.
Was one of them Grandma?
Grandma was one of them, and her sister was the other one.
Oh, okay. You watched it in the theater?
Yeah, we were in a theater, and it was a long movie, and they were about cried out by the time it was over.
I've seen a few of
It
those.
was an enjoyable movie. Now, they've got room for one funny little story?
Sure. You want it on video?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's hear it. Go ahead.
Okay. I thought of this when Betty was doing her talking. I proposed to Betty, and she said to me, "You have to ask my mother."
My dad.
Her dad. And her dad had a very bad temper. So I drove my car out into their lane, and it was really deep ruts. And when I got up to the house, I said to him, I said, "I think I knocked something loose underneath this car. Will you take a look?" And when he crawled underneath, so I knew that I could get away, I said, "Betty and I would like to
remember
get
that.
married."
I remember that too. Oh God. We had a good life though, you know?
What did he do? What did he do?
He said, "You've got to ask her mom."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, sure. Crazy, eh?
But he didn't come rolling out to pound on me anyway.
That's a good story.